Welcome to the Remote Control Podcast, where we push the limits of the mind and uncover the hidden history of psychic intelligence, from ancient oracles who challenged kings to Cold War spies buried in secrecy. We dive into remote viewing, anomalous cognition, Project Stargate, missing aircraft, Soviet time mirrors, Mars sessions, and mysteries like Tunguska. This isn't science fiction, but documented files and first-hand accounts from programs that tried to weaponize the mind.
Welcome to the deep dive. We have a really fascinating stack of sources in front of us today. It's a collection of documented files, first-person accounts that, well, they absolutely challenge what we assume is the border between history and speculative fiction.
You really do.
So today, we are embarking on a deep dive into the hidden history of psychic intelligence. We're going to be focusing specifically on remote viewing and this broader idea of anomalous cognition.
And it's an intense mission, for sure. Our sources really ask you to set aside skepticism just for a moment and focus purely on the evidence that's presented.
The evidence being what, exactly?
The resources dedicated, the programs that were launched, and importantly, the declassified claims made by powerful nations. We're looking at sources that say governments put serious time and money into this.
Right, into testing the limits of the human mind.
Exactly. Pushing the accepted boundaries of reality, not as some, theoretical exercise, but as a hard-nosed intelligence priority.
And that distinction is so crucial here. I think for you, the listener, the goal is to understand the sheer scope of this topic. How far back does this kind of influence really go, and what concrete documented claims are there?
Right.
Especially around these classified programs. Because if you look at the official documents, the first-person accounts, this is not about parlor tricks.
No, not at all. The core hook of these sources is that shift from folklore to documented history. We're talking about government programs that defined a specific protocol, remote viewing, as a formalized method for achieving anomalous cognition.
Which is the ability to gain information outside of known sensory channels.
That's it. This was a system that for decades was funded with one explicit goal:
to harness and potentially weaponize the mind for intelligence gathering.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this historical scope right away. Because if we're talking about psychic influence on, high-stakes national decisions, the timeline in these sources, it doesn't just start in the 1970s, does it?
Not even close. What's so compelling when you synthesize all this material is the historical through line it presents. The sources argue that anomalous cognition has been a strategic factor.
Strategic factor.
Strategic factor influencing major power structures across vast periods. They connect the ancient world, where this ability was, revered, directly to modern geopolitical conflicts where it was classified.
That is a staggering claim of continuity. So give us an example, a moment in ancient history that shows this kind of high-stakes influence.
Well, we're talking about instances of ancient oracles stunning kings, shaping national strategy. The sources specifically cite the influence of oracular council at the court of Lydia.
Lydia being a hugely powerful kingdom.
Hugely powerful, known for its wealth, its strategic importance, and in that context, the advice from an oracle wasn't just religious guidance. It was often seen as high-stakes strategic intelligence.
Guiding military campaigns, major state decisions, that sort of thing. It's just jarring to think that the methodology of state intelligence could be conceptually the same from, 500 BC to the height of the Cold War?
It is.
You have this image of an oracle guiding an ancient ruler, and then you jump forward thousands of years, and the sources say this same type of anomalous insight was being presented in classified briefings.
Directly in the Oval Office.
Wow.
And that surprising contrast that really defines the scope these sources claim. The underlying mechanism, using non-physical means to get critical intelligence, is asserted to be consistent.
So it doesn't matter if it's delivered by a figure in a robe or a scientist with security clearance.
Exactly. The claim is that the intelligence gained had direct input on key policy and military decisions, and that it spanned millennia. The sheer temporal scale is a powerful indicator of how seriously this capability has been taken.
Okay, that establishes a massive historical context. But it's the shift into the modern era, into the U.S.-Soviet rivalry, that really grounds this for us.
Absolutely. When we move into the Cold War, the whole narrative shifts from historical consultation to outright aggressive espionage. The sources detail a completely new paradigm. This concept of Cold War psychic spies locked in classified rooms, working against a known enemy. This wasn't just spiritual research anymore.
This was viewed as a strategic arms race.
That's it.
And we're not talking about a handful of researchers working in a basement either. These were extensive government-funded programs.
Correct. The key U.S. initiative the sources all focus on is Project Stargate.
Stargate.
This was the long-running classified U.S. program. It spanned decades, and it was dedicated to studying and trying to use remote viewing for actionable intelligence gathering.
So how did they do it? I mean, what were the methods? It couldn't just be people sitting down and, trying to be psychic.
No, and that's where the science aspect, or at least the attempt at science, comes in.
Yeah.
The program formalized the ability largely through the work of people like Ingo Swann.
He helped develop the methodology, right?
He did. A very specific, structured methodology known as coordinate remote viewing, or CRV.
Coordinate remote viewing. Okay, what did that protocol actually entail?
It was essentially a strict multi-stage procedure. It was designed to eliminate guesswork and subjective interpretation as much as possible. A viewer would be given a set of geographic coordinates, that's where the name comes from.
Just set a number.
Just numbers. And then they were required to sequentially sketch and describe their perceptions using standardized terms. First, broad geological features, then specific man-made structures, and finally, any human or functional activity.
So it's an attempt to turn a nebulous psychic ability into a repeatable, data-producing intelligence protocol.
That's the perfect way to put it. This level of technical standardization, it really shows the deep commitment to treating this as a serious intelligence asset.
And the ultimate goal wasn't just to gather some interesting data.
Yeah.
The sources are very clear about the terrifying objective that justified all this investment.
The stated objective was nothing less than to weaponize the mind. And if you consider the context of the Cold War nuclear escalation, massive armies, the idea that a small secret team could use psychic means to reliably view the enemy's missile silos.
Or submarine positions, or their classified research facilities.
It meant a complete paradigm shift in espionage. The government invested so heavily because, if it was successful, the strategic returns would have been infinite.
That investment of money and resources is maybe the most profound piece of evidence here. It proves how serious the intent was. Now, if we look at the missions themselves, they certainly weren't shy about ambition.
Not at all.
Let's dive into some of the specific targets mentioned in these declassified materials. They really showcase the practical, the mysterious, and the truly audacious goals of Project Stargate.
The mission files really do present a whole spectrum of targets. On the practical side, aligning with immediate intelligence needs, the sources cite sessions focused on tangible intelligence gathering.
Like what?
Like the search for missing aircraft or tracking the location of foreign assets and personnel. This was a direct, pragmatic attempt to use RV when traditional means had failed.
So it was sort of deployed as a fallback intelligence asset when you absolutely needed information urgently. That makes a strange kind of operational sense.
It does. But then the targets veer sharply away from those immediate tactical needs.
Into far deeper unsolved mystery.
They did. The programs weren't afraid to tackle historical enigmas. The sources mentioned documented sessions surrounding the Tunguska event.
The massive, unexplained 1908 explosion over Siberia.
That's the one. And the audacity here is that they weren't just looking for something contemporary. They were trying to gain insight into an event that happened decades earlier, across both space and time.
So did the sources provide any details on what the remote viewers allegedly found about Tunguska?
Yes, and the claims are fascinatingly specific. One claim described in the document suggested that the event wasn't related to a typical meteorite, but potentially to an advanced, low-flying technological device. Some kind of device that may have exploded in the atmosphere, leading to all that devastation. Now, we don't have confirmation, of course, but the fact that intelligence funds were spent to investigate a theory like that shows the immense scope of targets they considered viable.
And then we get to arguably the most notorious point of the entire program, the one that demonstrates the absolute peak of their ambition.
The infamous Mars sessions.
Right.
The Mars sessions are a crucial nugget of knowledge for you, the listener. They took place in 1984. They involved specific viewers, and they didn't just target the planet generally.
No, the coordinates were specific.
Very specific, allegedly focusing on an area of Mars at a point approximately 1 million years in the past.
And what were the alleged outcomes of targeting Mars 1 million years ago? What did they claim to see?
The reports allegedly described structures, pyramidal shapes, what was described as a massive technological-looking complex. All of it under adverse geological conditions.
So the claim was essentially that the viewer was perceiving ancient, possibly alien, civilization remnants.
That was the claim. And the sheer ambition of targeting specific coordinates on another planet in deep time, it just shows that the researchers believe the capabilities of anomalous cognition were, for all intents and purposes, limitless.
Now, we can't discuss the Cold War psychic arms race without bringing up the Soviet side. The documentation of their programs is a lot more opaque, but the sources do reference a major conceptual difference, don't they?
Absolutely. The sources confirm the Soviet Union was heavily involved in parallel research, but the material references their theoretical approach with a much more mysterious term.
Soviet time mirrors.
Exactly.
That phrase sounds like it's straight out of a Cold War novel.
Yeah.
What did the concept of time mirrors actually imply?
Well, if we look closely at what the sources are implying, the concept of a time mirror suggests a kind of technological or conceptual mechanism focused on capturing or reflecting information across the temporal spectrum.
So different from remote viewing.
Very different. Remote viewing generally targeted the present or maybe slightly into the past or future. Time mirrors, however, suggest the Soviet researchers were aiming for deliberate, targeted intelligence gathering spanning vast historical timelines, or perhaps even exploring parallel multidimensional realities.
So while the U.S. was trying to standardize how to view missile bases in the here and now,
Right.
the Soviet theoretical goal, according to these sources, was to potentially access information from the deep past to predict future events or understand strategic history.
Precisely. It demonstrates a highly aggressive and theoretically advanced ambition on the Soviet side. It was pushing the boundaries of what intelligence gathering could possibly mean, not just geographically, but temporally. The competition in this psychic spy game was robust, complex, and highly imaginative on both sides of the Iron Curtain.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, who's now trying to rapidly absorb all this hidden history? We've traced this concept from the court of Lydia, through classified briefings in the Oval Office, all the way to detailed sessions aiming to solve the Tunguska mystery and peer into ancient Mars.
I think the core takeaway is not that these abilities are definitively proven. The programs themselves were, after all, officially shuttered.
Right.
The key insight is the profound dedication of resources. Hundreds of millions of dollars, decades of research, the involvement of high-level intelligence agencies. It all confirms that major governments seriously invested in systematizing and weaponizing capabilities that the public routinely dismisses as pure fantasy.
This is documented history.
It is. It's a real, extensive attempt to leverage the furthest boundaries of the human mind.
And that investment and the declassified files detailing protocols like coordinate remote viewing and the specific targets they went after, it confirms this was treated as real intelligence.
It does,
Mhm.
which I think raises an important final question for you to mull over. If official government documents confirm extensive long-term efforts to explore psychic intelligence, resulting in these detailed protocols and specific, ambitious operational targets, and if those programs were later officially canceled...
What does that imply?
Exactly. Did the capability truly vanish? Or did the research simply achieve a level of sensitivity that demanded it retreat deeper underground, further away from public disclosure and any kind of standard scientific review?